Hey, Coach Miller here with BTB Lax. I have another college recap for you. Today is March 2nd, so let's dive into it. We had some awesome games last week. We also had some games going on this week already, and we have a lot of cool stuff coming up. The big storylines from last week: Jacksonville beat Denver, and they skyrocketed up the polls to 11th in the country, and Georgetown blitzed Notre Dame, so they are 3rd in the country. Let's take a look at some of my last week's thoughts, and we'll check in with those. My prediction was that Rutgers would be 5-0, and they were. I predicted that Brown would play well at UNC. They did. They lost by 3. I didn't think that Notre Dame should be favored at Georgetown. The game was 16-11. I'm going to show you some highlights of it. Georgetown won a big 11-3. Then Notre Dame stormed back, but then Georgetown pulled away after that. And then I also said if Jacksonville beats Denver, that'll be huge. So had some pretty good thoughts last week, and they all checked out. So let's take a look at some highlights. All right, here we go here with some clips from the Denver-Jacksonville game. Clip number 1, Jacksonville gets one of their goals from Jacob Greiner. He had 6 goals on the day, so he had a big day there. Next clip, we have Ted Sullivan. He actually went to Deerfield for 2 years with a strong lefty shot. He was a multi-sport athlete there. I took a look at the roster. This is early in the game when it was still, real close. Next clip, we have Jeremy Winston, another grad student. He spent his whole career at Jacksonville. We'll see him again. He's coming on strong, very influential on their team this year. Next clip, we have a feed to Max Walbaum, who I told you about, that transfer grad student from Tufts, with a nice behind-the-back shot there, no-look shot. So he's having a big season down there in Jacksonville. And here, this clip is pretty cool. So Max gets the feed. He sends back to Bryce W., because I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, but he stays with it, jumps in, gets the rebound, and puts it back in. So they had a lot of cool goals in this game. Next clip, this is Jack Hanna. He's a preseason midfielder of the year for Denver, first-team All-American, absolute stud. So he has a nice goal here to keep Denver, in the game. And this last clip is Winston again. Like I said, he's having a big year. He had a couple goals this game. He finishes. He's all fired up. Jacksonville gets the win. All right, we're going to take a look at some highlights from the Georgetown-Notre Dame game. It was a 1-1 game midway through the first quarter. Here we have Connor Morin. He likes to dodge from X for a nice little take around from the cage, getting above GLE for a goal. Puts them up 2-1. Georgetown got off to a fast start here in the first half. You're going to see they take an 11-3 lead, and then things start to get interesting. All right, clip number 2. We have Graham Bundy Jr. He's an inside lacrosse All-American last year. He has a goal. He has a great shot, puts him up 3-1. So here we fast forward to 11-3 Georgetown. So Georgetown scored a bunch of goals. Notre Dame has a chance here, but Owen McElroy has a great save. He's a first-team All-American, but just before the second half, Notre Dame gets on the board, and they get a goal, gives them a little momentum going into the second half. So there, Riley Gray, a junior from Chaminade, gets them on the board with their 4th goal of the game. Coming out of the second half, Notre Dame goes on a run. Here we have Morrison Meyer. He ended up having 3 goals in the 3rd quarter. He scored. He's a grad student from San Diego. He's scoring. Notre Dame's going on their run here. You can see he's got a great shot. All right, it's 11-7. Notre Dame's on their run. Eric Dobson, he's from Fleming Island, Florida. He's got one of the best outside shots on Notre Dame. He gets it to within 3. He does a great job catching it, bringing it across his body, gets his left hand free. Good underhand shot. Here we have a great goal, Kavanaugh to Kavanaugh. The Kavanaughs have been on Notre Dame forever, feeding the inside for a layup. Games within 2. Things are getting real interesting here. Again, we have Kavanaugh to Meyer. This is Meyer's 4th game. It's 11-10. This is Notre Dame's 8th unanswered goal. They're on an incredible run here. Georgetown hasn't scored since the first half, but things start to change coming up, and then they stay that way for the rest of the game, and Georgetown ends up winning by 5. So here we get Declan McDermott. He's a senior from Pleasantville, New York. He's got his first goal for Georgetown in the second half. He gets them some momentum. And then Graham Bundy Jr., that junior first-team All-American that I was talking about, gets a goal, and then they stay. Georgetown sticks with the victory. let's go through the different divisions. So with the ACC, we have Virginia on top at 4-0. Then we have Duke at 6-2. North Carolina's 4-1. So Virginia pounded Syracuse 20-11. It was 8-1 after the first quarter, and then they kept that lead pretty much throughout the rest of the game. Virginia is really good. Notre Dame got waxed by Georgetown. We saw the highlights of that game. Carolina beat Brown and Hopkins, so that was two good bounce-back wins for them. Duke lost to Penn in overtime up there, 14-13. Then after that, they beat High Point, and today Syracuse plays Army, so we'll keep an eye on that game. America East, Stony Brook. I was interested in Stony Brook to see what they play because they're 4-0. They beat Fairfield, Robert Morris, St. John's, and LIU. I think all those teams have losing records, but they got a big game up this Saturday against Rutgers. There's actually no line on that game. I was surprised because it's between two undefeated teams. Also, Vermont dropped to Brown in a tight game. Brown won that game 12-11. Atlantic Sun Conference. Not much going on here. The only thing I kept an eye on was I wanted to see if Air Force could do, upset Jacksonville after Jacksonville had that big win. That Jacksonville had to play two games. They had to play Denver. Then right after that, they played Air Force the next day. So they went out west, and they got two victories in. They must have had a fun plane ride home. The Big East. Georgetown's on top at 4-0. Rest of the teams are kind of, we'll see. Denver plays UNC this Saturday, so they could drop to 3-3. UNC is actually favored by 3.5 goals. As we talked about, Georgetown last week, they beat Notre Dame 16-11. Then yesterday, they actually pounded St. Mary's. In that Notre Dame game, Georgetown's faceoff guy, James Rowley, won 21 of 29 draws. Denver lost to Georgetown. Nova pounded Fairfield 16-9. Marquette lost to Utah 12-11. And then Providence lost to St. Joe's 15-8. I'm going to take a little look into St. Joe's later on as well. Big Ten, lots of good teams in the Big Ten. 4 teams are undefeated. 3 teams are in the top 5. Maryland's 1. Rutgers is 4. Ohio State is 5. So Rutgers beat Loyola 13-12 in a tight game. Loyola hasn't won a game yet. Maryland beat Princeton 15-10. Princeton didn't have their face-off units, though, because of COVID. Penn State beat Yale 10-6. Huge win for Penn State because they were big dogs in that game. Ohio State took down Harvard 17-12. Jack Myers had 11 points with 5 goals and 6 assists. He's 100% one of the best players in the country. Gonzaga grad. I know him well, so we'll be following him closely throughout the season. Michigan pounded Cleveland State 13-5. Then beat Marquette 12-10. They're 6-0, but they have a big game coming up, which I'll talk about. The CAA, so Delaware, they're 4-1. We saw them play Duke last week, played them kind of tight. Duke kind of controlled the game the whole way, but they came back, beat Monmouth 17-6, and then they have Michigan coming up, and they are getting 2.5 goals. I like that game a lot. You'll see it's going to be my pick game of the week. Ivy League. Yale, they dropped to Penn State, so they're 1-1. Cornell's on top. They're actually 3-0 because yesterday they beat Hobart, but they also over the weekend they beat Lehigh 9-5. Penn had a great big win over Duke in overtime, 14-13. And then Brown, they're 3-1. They beat Villanova yesterday, 15-14, and they also beat Vermont this past weekend in a goal game, so they've won a couple goal games. The MAC, so I don't really know much about the teams in the MAC, so I did a little research into St. Bonaventure because at the time they were 2-1 before they got beat by Richmond 17-3 yesterday. They've won 2 one-goal games over Bellarmine and VMI. They lost their opener to St. Joe's by a goal. Randy Mearns is their head coach, and the program started in 2017, so the program is pretty new. So I gave a little information about St. Bonaventure. Next week, I'm going to take a look at Manhattan and see what's going on with them. The NAC, St. Joe's, kind of talked about it. So they lost to Delaware last month by a goal, but then they beat Penn State by 2. And they crushed Providence 15-8. They got Monmouth next, so they could go to 4-1, so we'll keep an eye on them. St. Mary's, they were 3-2 going into yesterday. Then they got pounded by Georgetown 21-4. They lost to Delaware 12-6 earlier last month. They had a good opener against win over Navy, but right now they stand at 3-3. Hobart's 2-1 because they dropped to Cornell yesterday. Bryant was ranked early in their season, but now they have a losing record. Patriot League, Bucknell sits atop at 4-0. They beat Marist 15-7. BU's also undefeated, and they had a big win over UMass. That's a rivalry. They beat them 16-7. Pretty convincing win there. Army beat NGIT 18-4, but they play Syracuse today, so we'll keep an eye on that, see if they can make some noise by beating a good team there. And then Navy lost to High Point 14-13. Southern Conference, we've talked a lot about Jacksonville. They're 5-1. They beat Denver 11-9 last week. Jacob Greiner had 6 goals in that game. Max Walbaum, he leads the team in points. He's doing his 5th year down there at Jacksonville, and he played his undergrad at Tufts. So that's a great storyline for me because I went to Tufts and followed the Jumbles closely. High Point, they had a big win over Navy this past weekend. They played Duke yesterday, lost 18-14. They stand at 2-3. Division 3. I didn't realize this, but there's 31 conferences in Division 3. A lot more conferences in Division 3 than there are in Division 1. I'll be following certain big games throughout the season. The NESCAC hasn't really played any games other than Bates. They dropped to Babson 12-7. Salisbury, Gettysburg, that's always a big game. They played last Saturday. Salisbury won convincingly. Gettysburg got off to a slow start with 7 turnovers in the first quarter. They only had 5 shots, so they had more turnovers than shots. Salisbury won that game 11-6. Then Catholic, they took down Colorado College 19-14. Coach John Sachs is a Tufts grad. He's their head coach, so we'll be following them. They're half to a great year as well, so we'll be following them as the season moves along. Some lines that I'm interested in this week. Michigan, Delaware. Michigan's undefeated. Delaware has 1 loss. They're getting 2.5 goals. I like that a lot. Georgetown, Princeton. Princeton's getting 3.5 goals up there. They should have their face-off guys back. I know they have a good defense. A couple Gonzaga guys on that defense, actually. Denver getting 3.5 goals at home over UNC. Yale, UMass. I feel like this 4.5 line's kind of too big, seeing that it's another rivalry. Massachusetts coming off a loss, but Yale's also coming off a loss. BU just pounded Massachusetts. I don't know. I'm interested in that. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what I'm going to do there yet. Notre Dame, Maryland. Notre Dame is getting 2.5. They have a tough schedule. They started their season late. You look at someone, you know, in the ACC like Duke, they're 6-2, whereas Notre Dame's only played 2 games. Duke has played 8 games, and they have to start their season with 2 of their top 3 games against Georgetown, now Maryland. So Maryland's usually favored by 3.5 goals, 4 goals. So this is probably the fewest they've been favored of the season. And Loyola plays Towson. Towson's getting 3.5 goals, but Loyola hasn't won a game yet, so I'm interested in that. My predictions for this week, I'm interested in that Rutgers-Stony Brook game because both teams are undefeated. Stony Brook really hasn't played anybody, but I know they're going to play Rutgers tough. I do think Rutgers wins. Very interested in the Delaware-Michigan game to see if Michigan, you know, is legit after that 6-0 start. I think Richmond's going to take down Duke. Richmond, I know their coach, Coach Miller, is a Duke grad. They play them. He plays ACC, you know, talent every single year. They're well coached. I'm interested to see what happens there. I like Richmond to take down Duke. Some big games to watch. You got Notre Dame at Maryland, Georgetown at Princeton, Penn State at Penn. Then also Ohio State and Cornell play. That's another big game. So keep an eye on that. My pick of the week, I like Delaware getting 2.5 goals. I could see Michigan winning, but I mean 2.5 goals, that's a decent little cushion there. So, and here we got the standings for the week of February 28, 2022. I go off the USILA rankings here. Maryland stays at 1, Virginia at 2. That goes unchanged. Georgetown at 3, Rutgers 4, Ohio State 5 to wrap up the top 5. And Penn, they're 6, even though they're 1-1. So they have a lot of, you know, I guess clout from prior years for what they've done, whatnot. And beating Duke, I guess, was big in the, you know, the rankings. And then the other big news is Jacksonville shot up to number 11, in which they deserve. So there you have it. there's the weekly recap for this week. If you like it, please go ahead and like this video. Make sure you subscribe to this channel so you can see more of them as I put them out. I'll be putting them out every single week. Also, if you're looking for some online instruction, I got the links right in the description of this video. Go ahead and check that out. I got all sorts of instruction from like comprehensive training to shooting training to recruiting advice and program about that. So just check that out and you get started right away. Talk soon. Coach Miller.